Hey, folks, James W. Falcon here. Happy Wednesday. Folks, I am not kidding you. This is my sixth attempt to record this podcast. Number six, most system failures. So I'm wondering, does that mean I should just not do this? Or does that mean the enemy is trying to stop this message because somebody out there needs to hear this and they need to hear it now? So in either case, I'm going to move forward and we shall see, won't we? So anyway, want to talk to you about card today, the day's card. It's card number 4, but it's day 3 of our 16-day self-love focus. The card today, again, you're going to hear this information. It's going to say, you're going to say, James, this sounds like something you've already said. I know you've mentioned this point, and you're going to hear that because it's meant to be repetitive. It's meant to be overlapping. It's meant to be something that reinforces, especially in these early days, the principles that we are building on, so we make sure we get a good, sturdy, solid foundation. So you've heard this before. I read a portion of this. This is all from the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation's definition of self-love. Today's card reads as follows: having a high regard for your well-being and happiness. This is a big pill to swallow, folks, and here's why. In order to have a high regard for your well-being and happiness, buckle up, here we go, we're going in. It means you cannot have as high a regard for other people's well-being and happiness. I know that stings, I know that hurts. In order for you to say yes to you, you have to say no to several other people. In order for you to say yes to your pursuits, you're going to have to know that you have to say no to other people's requests, pursuits, and things. In order for you to have a high regard for your well-being, it does not mean that you have license and wherewithal to become a monster, to be selfish, self-centered, or self-absorbed. It may look like that, but that's not what's happening. You're just simply saying to friends and family or whoever you need to communicate to, you're saying to them, this thing that I'm working on is important enough to me that it requires my focus. Okay? That's what you're saying. And that doesn't have to happen with other people's permissions, affirmations, or sign offs. Let me say that again. Your pursuits do not require other people's permissions, sign offs, or affirmations. It just doesn't. Here's an example. Again, by the grace of God, I am an author. I've had the blessing of writing 20 books. That means at least 20 different times and seasons in my life. Hear me. I have had to say no to somebody and to other things in order for me to have written 20 books. If I had said yes to other people as much as I had to say yes to myself while writing these books, I never would have written a single book. But as it stands, I've written 20 of them. So at least that means I know this principle enough to be able to communicate it effectively and with passion and experience enough to be able to help you to understand this is what has to happen. If you or I were aspiring professional athletes, if we played some pro level ball or whatever the case would be, we would know that it takes that. Look at our Olympic athletes. They trained from the time they were 6, 7 years old to be able to get through college into the realms of world-class athleticism to be able to perform on the Olympic stage. All their lives, all they've known is gymnastics or whatever their event was. It took laser focus. That meant they had to say no to so many things. So you have to have a resolve, my listening friend. And I'm telling you this as a person and as a group, rather, that is basing self love as a support system to help people to pursue their goals. I'm using it in that context. So I'm talking to a group of people who are moving from one place to the next, from one state of being to another state of being, from one state of mind to another state of mind, from one state of thinking, believing, acting, knowing to another state of thinking, believing, acting, and knowing. You're moving from A to B or from A to Z. You're in motion. We are trying to pursue something. Just for the last couple of days, I have been migrating all of my stuff from one website for my coaching practice to a brand new domain and website. And it's taken some focus. To do that, I've had to say yes to that migration process, but I've had to say no to several other things. And if I didn't say no, I had to say not right now or maybe later. But I could not do that unless I am expressly and supremely focused, is my point. Okay. Yes to me, yes to my well being and happiness means no to somebody else's. And that's just the way it is. So I'm going to say this next piece very empathetically, very lovingly. Not that I haven't been empathetic and loving before, but I want to make sure I turn up the empathy and the compassion when I tell you this. I've been this person for years, a people pleaser. Like I didn't have the guts, the gumption to look a person in the face and say no. And for years I caved in. So what I'm about to tell you, I say tongue in cheek and with clenched teeth, realizing that it hasn't been very long ago that I've been this person. So if you are the person that thinks and believes that your time is never your own, that other people are always offering you a drum beat that you must tap dance to, then I want you to hear me as a colleague and a fellow sufferer, a person that understands how painful those things may be, because you wake up and every waking moment it seems like you're having to give to somebody else's cause. That is a painful way to live, but it is unfortunately the predicament that we find ourselves in. If that's you, then I want you to hear me and pump the brakes just long enough to realize you're not being selfish. You're not being self centered. You're not being self absorbed. You're not being snooty. You're not being nasty. You're not being stuck up. When you have to tell somebody else, I'm sorry, but I cannot do that right now. I'm sorry, but I am in the midst of something. Listen, I have had, this is no 6 times I've tried to do this recording. Again, mostly because of technical issues. But on that 6th time, you know what I did? First thing I did, and I should have done this 4 times sooner. I went into my phone and I put on my do not disturb feature, that from 11 a.m. to at least 1 to 2, I'm not going to take any calls or return any text messages because I desperately want to get this done. I want to serve you guys in the way that I promised I would. So to say yes to doing this means I have to say no to anything else. Why? Because on 6 occasions, just within the past hour, something has happened that's prevented me, literally opposed me from being able to do this simple recording. I cannot suffer, nor can you suffer for me to have a 7th experience. 6th is 6 too many, as my father used to say, right? So I had to resort to putting the do not disturb feature on my phone. I can't afford to have a call, a text, because whoever's calling or texting, it's an emergency for them. I'm sure it's going to be. It's crisis for them, but it can't be, and it shall not be crisis or emergency for me. For me, I have to be able to stay focused. Now, after the recording, I will be all kinds of in good neighbor mode, and I'll be able to reach out and be whatever somebody else needs me to be. But for the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'm a podcaster to the Why Not Celebrate Your Wins group. This has got to be done. Make sense? To say yes to something means you have to say no to something else. And that something may be multiple things. It may be multiple people. Have the grit, the gumption, and the courage, my listening friend, to say yes to you more times than you typically think to. And then have the grit, the gumption, and the courage to say no to other things and other people more times than you would normally do so, especially when you are in the midst of pursuing a goal, developing a goal, or just before you cross, you start rounding the corner in the track, on the track thing, to use a track analogy. When you start rounding that corner to get to that last stretch before you break the tape of the finish line, that's when you have to be supremely, expressly focused. And that's the time when you definitely have to say, hey, I can't do that right now. I'm sorry. And you have, here's the last point I'm going to share, very lovingly, compassionately, and very empathetically. My listening and viewing friend, you're going to have to, in this process, be a person that lays your head down at night. Here we go, y'all. Big pill. You ready? Put your seatbelt on. That lays your head down at night without being guilty and without suffering through self condemning seasons, thoughts, thinking that you're a horrible person. Oh my God, I'm so much less a Christian. Or I'm at least perceived that way. Listen, you've got to be okay with that. You have to, because you can't write a book. I'm going to use my book writing thing as an example. You can't write a book. You can't write multiple books. You can't write 20 books. You can't write any. You can't write a blog. You can't write an email. You can't write a memo, a sticky note, if you don't understand, or if you're not willing to at least put these principles into practice now. Makes sense? And I know that's a big, harsh pill to swallow. Forgive me if I sound condemning, scolding, critical, whatever the other negative things might be. That's not what that's not the spirit from which I'm drawing. That's not the well from which I am drawing to give you. It is a well of experience and compassion, the well of a coach, the well of a coach who has coached hundreds of people on these very same things. So many people come to a coach, they contact people like me because they don't have control of their days, their time. They've lost track of where they are on the map. And if years have gone by and they look up and they say, oh my God, 20 years ago I said I was going to have done X, Y, and Z. But in 20 years' time, all I've done was been pigeon-toed here in a certain, wherever here is. And then you realize, you look up and pages after pages of the calendar you've turned. And time has gone by, and all you've been able to mark was the time change. You haven't anchored yourself anywhere in the course of things to be able to take control back so that you start doing what needs to be done based on what you say needs to be done, not according to somebody else's needs, whims, wishes, or requirements. And then what happens is you start to lose power. And you know what happens when you do that? You start to feel bad about yourself. You start to slip into a little dark hole. You start to think less of yourself. You start to say to yourself, man, I'm so far behind in life. My other friends and colleagues, they have X, Y, and Z, and I'm still struggling over here with meager means, or with much less than I thought I was going to have by this age. If you've ever been there, listen, you're in good company. Trust me. No condemnation, no judgment. But if you're there and you want to reach for something, listen, all you got to do is follow the example of our fearless founding member and visionary, Laverna Saunders. I was coaching her through a process, and she knows this, so she's given me license to share this, and she will share her story in due time. But she was stuck not stuck, but she was in a caregiver's mode, and she was caring for her mom. Is presently caring for her mom, and that is a noble thing to do, no doubt. You can't do anything of a higher calling anymore than to take care of the woman that took care of you. So no condemnation, no criticism at all, especially for me as a family member of hers. She's my cousin. So definitely no criticism to her, me to her, ever, because I get it and I appreciate what she's done. But just for you, if you're listening and you're in that situation, here's the difference with Laverne. At one day during our coaching session, a light bulb came in, and she dared to reach for something different. For one time, and we talked weeks after the light bulb went off, because during that time when the light bulb went off is when she and I birthed the Why Not Celebrate Your Wins group. Because at that time, when the light bulb went off, here's what happened. Laverna dared to put her well-being and her happiness above that of her mother's. Whoa, that's deep. Think about that. She dared. She said, I love my mother, but I've got to take some time to do at least this one thing for me, for myself. And she did it. And I'm having the podcast struggles I'm having today recording this because it's being recorded for this group. This group exists because a woman a month and a half, 2 months ago, like we're not talking about years ago, folks. The Well Now group was launched in Facebook on July 20th, 2023. We're talking about this past July. So we're not talking about ancient history. This is not an organization whose founding fathers founded this back in the 20s. I'm talking about July this year is when this group was launched. So you figure it took 2 months before that launch was when Laverne and I started having our discussions. Excuse me. We started having these discussions. So we're not talking about ancient history. This is not during the days of black and white television. We're talking recently. She dared to step out of caregiving mode, a mode she had been in, taking care of her mom presently, her father, and our aunt. She has been a caregiver for nearly 15 to 20 years. That's all she's been able to do. And she's seen time go by. And guess what? She was bold enough. She was courageous enough to step out of, caregiving mode just long enough for her and I to have a collaborative discussion on bringing this group into being. And here we are. Whoever you are, allow Laverna Saunders, our visionary founder for this group, to be your light and your inspiration. You can do the same thing. She had to make a decision. She didn't neglect her mother. She didn't let her mother suffer. Her mother's bedridden. She didn't let her mother stay in a bed and call out her name and call for the caregivers. And she just listened to the yells and the screams and the moans. She didn't do that. She cared for her mother. But in certain moments, she put her well-being, Laverna's well-being, she put her well-being and her happiness just a few notches above her mom's, just long enough for her to have something where she can mark the time with having accomplished a goal, having brought to reality a dream, a vision. You understand the point? She did that, and here we are. What would happen, my listening friend, if you were to do that? What changes would be brought about in your world? What people would be blessed because you dared to be courageous? Think on that, okay? And whatever you do, my listening friend, be, and stay encouraged. I hope that throughout the course of this day and every day, there's an abundance of peace and power in your household. Thank you, Lord, for allowing me to complete this podcast after my 6th attempt. So I hope this blesses you, and I hope you're able to do something with this immediately. Until the next time I'm in front of you,